The imposing 12th century St. Julien Cathedral dominates the city of Le Mans skyline. Le Mans, capital of the Sarthe region in France, is of course famous for another reason. The annual 24 Hours of Le Mans, the most famous motor race in the world. South African involvement at Le Mans dates back to the 1920s, when Wolf Benato, nephew of Barney Benato, won the race 3 times in a row for Bentley. In 1984, a new link with Le Mans was forged when George Fouche, just 19 years of age, became the youngest driver ever to compete in the famous race. The lure of Le Mans saw Fouche back at the mecca of motorsport in 1985 and 1986, when he was still the youngest driver in the race. Now 29, Fouche has been back at Le Mans every year since 1984, with 6 top 10 finishes to his credit. The young South African has driven for some of the top manufacturers in world sports car racing. George Fouche was back at Le Mans this year, hoping to fulfill a boyhood dream and win the race of races. Agonizingly close best sums up George Fouche's 11th assault on the Le Mans 24-hour. After leading for 8 hours, he had to settle for 4th at the flag. Join George in the cockpit as FGP presents highlights of the 1994 Le Mans 24-hour. The 24 Hours of Le Mans has a special appeal for those hooked on the motor racing drug. George Fouche, here on the left with his good friend and co-driver Stephen Ansskär, was back at Le Mans for the 11th year in a row and his 5th consecutive appearance for the Japanese Trust team. Fouche and Ansskär have teamed up 5 times at Le Mans and have raced together in the Japanese Sports Car Championship as well as in World Sports Car Championship events. The South African and the Swede were this year teamed up with a sports car legend, Bob Wollek, the Frenchman making his 24th appearance at Le Mans. Only 4-time winner Henri Pescarolo, back for the 28th time, has more Le Mans appearances than Wollek and 5-time winner Derek Bell. Was this going to be Wollek's year in a Nisso Trust team run by Yasuo Toyota, who incidentally is no relation to the manufacturer of the car that carries his name? Le Mans was this year open to cars competing in 5 categories, with the Toyota and a sister car from the Sarthe team running in the top Group C class. A number of cars which previously raced in the Group C category, including Porsche 962s, took advantage of loopholes in the regulations to run in the GT class. But with a huge variety of machinery entered, nobody was unduly perturbed. The Nisso Trust team was also relaxed when it came to qualifying strategy.
Well, we have a qualifying engine. Obviously we cannot run boost with the new regulations, the air restrictor we're running. And we've got a bit of downforce loaded into the car, so we're just going to give it a bash. Nothing too serious, it's not that important to be on pole here. Just to be in the first 10 would be sufficient, so we're just going to run around, try and put it in the first 10, and after that obviously put it into a race trim configuration and go for it.
The atmosphere in the build-up to the first qualifying sessions is almost as electric as that for the race itself. Huge amounts of work go into preparing cars for Le Mans, and as the start of the qualifying approaches, everything is checked and double-checked. Drivers and team managers pay attention to detail. That could mean the difference between success and failure in the race. After years of driving for teams like Ansskär and Fouche, Bob Wollek was making his first acquaintance with the Toyota. Like the thorough professional he is, Bob was taking no chances, and with team manager Yasuo Toyota on hand, checked out the seating arrangements in the Toyota before the cars went out onto the circuit for the first qualifying session. George Fouche and Stephen Ansskär are in their 3rd year with the Trust Toyota team and need no introduction to the car. It was decided to allow Wollek to go out first and get a feel for the Toyota. And there goes the great Derek Bell in the open cockpit Gulf Kramer Porsche, and that's turning the clock back to Le Mans glory days. In came Bob Wollek after his first taste of Le Mans in a Toyota, and he was replaced in the car by George Fouche. Attention to detail is a key factor in motor racing. Each driver has his own seat. The seat is moulded around the driver, and they also carry a plastic bottle containing fluids. It was hot and muggy at Le Mans this year, and with drivers wearing fireproof underwear and Nomex overalls, they dehydrate very quickly in the confined space of the car's cockpit. The stops for driver changes are put to good use by the technical crew. Tyre pressures, temperatures and wear and tear are carefully monitored. Checks and minor adjustments are made in the engine compartment. For technicians and drivers, it's another day at the office. For the all hands at Le Mans, it doesn't take long to slip into the routine required for a 24-hour race. Back in the pits, Wollek is already deep in conversation with team manager Yasuo Toyota. Feedback from the driver is of vital importance to the technical crew. Experienced campaigners like Wollek provide valuable input, which will later be discussed with the other drivers. And it's on the basis of this sort of information that changes are made to the setup of the car. Born in Pretoria, George Fouche started racing karts as a 12-year-old. By the time he was 15, he was chalking up wins in oval track racing. Still too young to drive legally on public roads, Fouche was quickly building a reputation in local racing in saloon cars and single-seaters. Since his first Le Mans appearance as a 19-year-old, Fouche has developed into one of the world's top sports car drivers. Like every other race driver, Fouche has aspirations of making it into Formula One, and earlier this year, test drove the Sassel Jordan Formula One car. The only foreign element in the all-Japanese Nisso Trust Toyota team was the three drivers. While a South African, a Frenchman and a Swede went to work on the track, every aspect of the Toyota's performance was methodically plotted behind the scenes in the pit. While team manager Yasuo Toyota consulted with his drivers, banks of computers recorded every mechanical detail on the Toyota for later assimilation. Four qualifying sessions, 2 on each day of practice, are run at Le Mans. Qualifying on each day is split between day and night sessions. Each driver in each team must qualify in at least 1 day and 1 night session to be eligible for the race. During the race, no driver is allowed to stay behind the wheel for more than 4 hours at a stretch and must rest for a minimum of 2 hours between each stint behind the wheel. Each individual is also allowed a maximum of 14 hours behind the wheel during the race. The Nisso Trust Toyota team had an uneventful time of it during the official qualifying sessions. The team went quietly about its work, and Fouche finally put the team 8th on the grid. Much to the delight of local enthusiasts, pole position went to the team run by Frenchman Yves Courage, with Alain Ferté setting fastest time in one of 3 Courage entries. In his last Le Mans appearance, Derek Bell put the Gulf Kramer Porsche on the front row of the grid alongside Ferté.
We achieved what we wanted to do, getting the first 10. We qualified 8th, so we're pretty happy. We didn't go all out to prove anything, so the team's happy. It's just now to prepare the car for the race.
And what does that preparation involve?
Well, we're going to put in new engine, new gearbox, new brake systems, have everything crack checked, and we're going to give it a run tomorrow night, and after that hopefully everything's intact and we can give it a go.
FGP committed to securing South Africa's future in Grand Prix racing. Between the end of qualifying and race day, the Nisso Trust Toyota was virtually rebuilt. As George Fouche mentioned earlier, the car was fitted with a new engine, new gearbox and braking system. Tyres are also an integral part of the equation, and instead of individual tyre warmers, a la Grand Prix style, the Toyota team made use of a rack through which hot air was pumped. The mechanical build-up to the race is a period that belongs solely to the technical crew. Once again, attention to detail is vital. For the drivers, there was also an impromptu session where technical crew briefed Fouche and company on emergency repairs designed to get them back to the pits should the car break down somewhere out on the circuit. There was also a cache of emergency tools on board the Toyota. A nice touch in the Nisso Trust garage was a wall full of messages of encouragement and good luck from team supporters in Japan and throughout the world. No other race can match the Le Mans 24-hour for atmosphere as the countdown to the start begins. This year, a wacky jazz band meandered through the garages, and along with the traditional Hawaiian Tropic Girls and the driver parade, the moments leading up to the start were more relaxed than is usually the case at the most famous motor race in the world. The huge crowd basking in warm sunshine loved every moment of it. Motor enthusiasts from all over the world had made the annual pilgrimage to Le Mans, and they were going to enjoy every moment of it. But for the technical crews and those drivers down to do the first sync behind the wheel, there was an underlying tension. Teamwork is essential in a 24-hour race, and over the years, George Fouche and Ansskär have built up a tremendous understanding.
As a driver, he's very good, he's very quick, and the best is that him and I have exactly the same opinion about the car settings and everything. That's the reason, one of the reasons why we have been together so long time. When we set up a car, if I set up a car, I mean, he's very happy with that, and it's vice versa. If he set up a car, I'm very happy. So we have a very good combination.
Another close Fouche friend is Cecil Jordan Formula One driver Eddie Irvine.
I first came across George in 1990 when I went out to do a race at Fuji in a Porsche 956, and it was this guy and another Porsche 956. He was about 4 seconds a lap faster than I was, and I'm going, who is this guy? And I never met him that time, and then went back to Japan full time, racing in 91, and bumped into him. We got chatting, and he's a good bloke, and he's obviously a bloody good driver as well.
If an army marches on its stomach, much the same can be said for motor racing teams. In the Nisso Trust hospitality tent, traditional Japanese cuisine was replaced, at least where the drivers are concerned, by good old-fashioned Italian pasta. Tons of pasta are consumed by race teams around the world, and while Fouche and Ansskär indulged in carbo loading, Bob Wollek busied himself with thoughts of a more tactical nature.
I'm starting the race, and in actual fact we don't have a strategy. The strategy is to go as fast as we can, being safe for the car and for ourselves and for the team, and we see after an hour or two or three what the situation is, if we have to go faster or if we keep the same kind of speed, or even if we can slow down a little bit. It just depends on the opposition. You know, there has been no races this year for this kind of cars around the world, so it's actually everybody's an unknown quantity for the other team. So we have to wait for an hour or two, see how strong and for how long the Porsche factory car is, how strong the Courage is.
With the countdown to the race in its final stages, the tension starts to mount. For the drivers who are going to start the race, it's a difficult time. They are left with their own thoughts, but for those team members who can still afford a little relaxation, the Hawaiian Tropic Girls are the ideal diversion. Even the huge crowd quietened down as the start grid was cleared. 48 cars were about to come under starters' orders. Bob Wollek waits patiently in the Toyota as the cars get the green flag to set off on the parade lap. Under the Dunlop Bridge they go on the section leading to Tetra Rouge and the start of the Mulsanne Straight. The once fearsome Mulsanne, over 7 kilometers long, now incorporates 2 chicanes to slow down the cars. Honda make their first ever appearance at Le Mans with 3 Honda NSX entries. And here they come onto the pit straight with an awful amount of horsepower unleashed as the 1994 24 Hours of Le Mans gets underway, with Derek Bell and the Gulf Kramer Porsche into an immediate lead. Lap 1 of the 1994 Le Mans 24 Hour, and Derek Bell in the Gulf Porsche leads from the Courage driven by Alain Ferte as the cars stream under the Dunlop Bridge and head towards Tetra Rouge corner. Behind Bell and Ferte come the 2 Porsche 962 GTs, with another Le Mans winner, Hans Stuck, in third in the first of the Porsches. The cars exit the first of the 2 chicanes on the Mulsanne, with Bell still in the lead from Ferte. The old Mulsanne was probably the most daunting section of racetrack in the world, and there are many Le Mans enthusiasts who think the race has lost a lot of its character with the introduction of the chicanes. Into the second chicane, and Alain Fertier has found a way past Derek Bell, and a Courage car leads at Le Mans for the first time in the team's history. That will keep the French fans happy. Into the Mulsanne corner for the first time, and Fertier leads Bell, Stuck and Jordan Grand Prix driver Eddie Irvine in the Saad Toyota, the sister car to the Trust Toyota, driven by South African George Fouche, Bob Wollek and Stephen Ansskär. The front runners are closely bunched. The Irvine car appears to have bodywork damage on the left front of the car as they come out of Arnage and head towards the Porsche curves. What a boost for the French fans as we approach the end of lap 1 with Alain Fertier out in front in the Courage. The Courage team has its headquarters just 4 kilometers from Le Mans and, would you believe it, has just 4 permanent employees. It's a small team, but their numbers for this race have been boosted to about 50, and they, along with the whole of France, will be hoping the car is still in the lead after 24 hours. The end of lap 1, and as they stream down the pit straight, an indication of the variety of cars in this year's race. And we have an early casualty. Into the sand trap goes the Courage, driven by Jean-Louis Ricky, and behind him the 22 car, the WR Peugeot of Jean-Francois Yvon, goes spinning off the circuit. It's early days, with Fertier still leading from Bell, with the Hans Stuck, Thierry Boots and Danny Sullivan Porsche in third place. Bob Wollek in the Nissan Trust Toyota is going well and has moved up 2 places into 6th.
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, the electricity here is just unbelievable. I mean, you really have to be here to feel it. You can't really explain it, but for me it's fantastic.
Another spinner, and that's Jordan Grand Prix driver Eddie Irvine making a mistake in the Saad Toyota he's sharing with Mauro Martini and Jeff Krosnoff. There is a 4th name on the Toyota, that of Roland Ratzenberger. The Austrian driver who was tragically killed at the San Marino Grand Prix was to have driven the Toyota at Le Mans. And another car in trouble, this time at the first of the Mulsanne chicanes. This is the number 65 Ventura, driven by Stefan Ratel. He makes a complete mess of it in the chicane, and is he going to hit that barrier? The car is sliding towards the tyre barrier. Yes, he is. Contact. And look at those marshals diving for cover. They certainly saw that one coming. The suspense is not yet over for Ratel, with the car sliding towards the concrete wall. Fortunately for the French driver, there is no further damage to the car or ego. The front runners were still closely bunched, with only seconds separating the first 8 cars on the road. The Fouche Wollek Ansskär Toyota was still in 6th place and running strongly. With the cars coming up for the first of the scheduled pit stops, a tremendous duel was developing at the front of the field. The pit stops could see changes on the leaderboard. In the Trust Toyota pit, George Fouche was waiting to take over from Bob Wollek. The organisers, the Automobile Club del West, certainly went out of their way to attract a mixed bunch of machinery. And if you were a spectator at Ford Corner, you could watch on a giant screen as the cars disappeared down the tree-lined Mulsanne straight, leading towards Mulsanne Corner. The 2 factory-backed Dow Porsche 962s took full advantage of loopholes in the regulations to move into the lead. Running in the GT class, the Porsches were allowed to carry more fuel than the Group C cars. This allowed them to stay out on the circuit a little longer. While the Group C cars were forced into the pits every 12 or 13 laps for refueling, the Porsches could stay out an extra lap or 2. The fact that the Porsches were running at the same pace as the Group C cars was an added bonus for the German factory team. The Eddie Irvine, Mauro Martini, Jeff Krosnoff Toyota was also running strongly in the top 5. An intriguing battle had developed between the 2 Toyotas, the 2 Dow Porsche 962s, the leading Courage and the open cockpit Gulf Kramer Porsche. All in all, it was shaping up as the closest Le Mans race in years. Taking a leaf out of the Grand Prix book, the organisers at Le Mans this year also introduced a speed limit in pit lane. While the Courage and the Saad Toyota sedately left the crowded pit lane in tandem to rejoin the fray after routine stops for driver changes and refueling, there were problems for one of the Dodge Vipers. The car, with Philippe Gache behind the wheel, was wheeled into the garage for running repairs. There were no such problems for the Dalmas-Haywood-Baldy Porsche. As always, the Porsche pit stops were models of efficiency. There's an interesting story behind the appearance of the Porsche 962s in the GT category at Le Mans this year. The Porsche 962 design basically first appeared at Le Mans 14 years ago as an out-and-out racing car. Then along came Joachim Dauer, who converted the design into a road-going vehicle, and presto, a GT car. Porsche spotted the fuel loophole in the regulations, and overnight the GT was turned back into a racing car. It's a ploy that did not find favor with everyone, but Porsche insisted that they were only trying to win the GT category at Le Mans this year. Judging by the performance of the two Dauer cars in the early hours of the race, they were contenders for more than just GT honours, and overall victory was not out of their reach. Into the pits is the second Dauer Porsche with a highly impressive driver lineup. Hans Stuck won Le Mans in a similar car a couple of years ago, while Thierry Boutsen won 3 Grand Prix in a Formula One career that took in more than 160 races. The third driver, American Danny Sullivan, has won the Indianapolis 500 and is also a former Grand Prix driver. The organisers this year banned simultaneous refuelling and tyre changes. Pit crew now had to wait until refuelling had been completed before moving in to change tyres. On goes the wheel nut, in goes the circlip, up goes the mechanic's hand, and the car is ready to roll again. It's easy when you know how, and a little practice makes perfect. As the end of the first hour of the race approached, the two Toyotas were running in tandem in second and third places. There is one of the Honda NSXs, but the Toyotas were closing in on race leaders Stuck, Boutsen and Sullivan in the Dauer Porsche. The Saad and Nisso Trust Toyota squads are rival teams, but run with a great deal of support from the Toyota factory. And there you see how close it was with the 3 leading cars racing together as they deal with slower traffic. In the Nisso Trust Toyota team, everything was going according to plan. The only stops had been routine ones for driver changes, refueling and to take on new tyres. Team manager Yasuo Toyota was in a relaxed mood, but the Trust Toyota pit stops were run with military precision. This was the 8th year Toyota have competed at Le Mans, but its rivals Mazda, who were the only Japanese manufacturer ever to have won Le Mans. Mazda scored an historic win in 1991 with Grand Prix drivers Johnny Herbert and Bertrand Gachot teaming up with German sports car star Volker Weidler to stun the racing world. In goes the fuel, with other technicians standing by to change the tyres. The very nature of endurance racing dictates that routine pit stops are far less frenetic than those in Formula One. Every move during pit stops, including the driver changes and work done on the car, is also recorded by pit marshals assigned to each team. With other lead cars also making routine pit stops, the Trust Toyota was still in the first 3. At this stage, everything was still going according to schedule. While George Fouche, always a glutton for work at Le Mans, took the car out for his stint, teammate Stephen Ansskär, Bob Wollek, took time out to discuss the race so far.
Don't forget it's a 24-hour race, and we are not trained well to do a 24-hour race.
After an hour of Le Mans 94, the Stuck Sullivan Boutsen Porsche led the 2 Toyotas. 2 Dauer Porsches, the 2 Toyotas and 2 Courage entries made up the top 6. A bird's-eye view of the Morzan at speed from the cockpit of one of the Honda NSXs entered in the GT category. Many people in motor racing feel the GT category is the way Le Mans will go in the future. The general public appreciate the close racing and identify with the cars. In their first appearance at Le Mans, Honda put in a major effort this year. The team worked closely with the Kramer organization, which for years ran Porsche at Le Mans, with George Fouche and Sorel van der Merwe included among their drivers down the years. And trouble for the Dauer Porsche, driven by Yannick Dalmas, Hurley Haywood and Maura Baldi. The car ran out of petrol, but what a lucky break for the team. It happened in pit road. Had that happened anywhere else on the circuit, it would have been the end of their challenge. The second Porsche is now running third behind the 2 Toyotas after the latest round of pit stops. And high drama for Danny Sullivan. That looks like an engine blow-up as the car takes to the grass and then swaps ends. No, it's a flat tyre. The left rear tyre has blown apart, and that's cruel luck for the team. That was a dodgy moment for the number 35 Porsche, and that has hurt their victory chances. The Stuck-Sullivan-Boutsen combination got a rough break there. The tyre blew just after the entrance to pit lane, and Sullivan had to do another lap, and that's around 13 kilometres to get the car into the pits. It's going to be the longest and slowest lap of Danny Sullivan's career. And look at Hans Stuck waiting in the pits to take over the driving from Sullivan. He knows what that burst tyre has done to their chances of winning. Stuck is devastated as the number 35 Porsche limps around the circuit on its way to the pits. Situations like this are always fraught with danger because there is every chance of causing irreparable damage to the suspension. The pits will be in touch with Sullivan over the radio as he inches his way around the circuit, and they know what to expect. That lap took Sullivan over 11 minutes, almost 3 times as long as a normal lap around the circuit. The Porsche pit crew spring into action, and there is the offending tyre.
The most challenging would be, for me, going into Indianapolis, because you're going through the forests. It's, to me, the most dangerous part. The first part of Indianapolis is 4th gear, and you're basically braking while going through that corner to get back to 3rd, to the second part of Indianapolis.
4 hours into the race, and the Delmas Martini Krosnoff Toyota leads the Dower Porsche with the Trust Toyota team in 3rd place. The 2 Courages and the second Dower car complete the top 6. A little rustic tranquility, and that's part of the charm of Le Mans. But there's nothing rustic or tranquil about the action on the track as the sun starts to set. The race could be won and lost during the night. Back in the Nisso Trust Team garage, technicians take the opportunity to relax and snatch 40 winks. Everyone keeps a watchful eye on the TV and timing monitors in the pits, but with the night stints approaching, tension builds in the entire team. Old hands at Le Mans like Bob Wollek have seen it all, but for the younger drivers like Stephen Ansskär, the first night session is always the most difficult part of the race. A little weariness has already started to creep in where drivers and technicians are concerned, but it's then that the adrenaline starts to take over. The Trust Toyota pit crews get ready for the arrival of their charge George Fouche, always looking for extra work at Le Mans, who is about to complete a triple stint behind the wheel. Fouche just loves the challenge presented by endurance racing, and his strength and stamina are tremendous assets for the entire team. As cheerful as ever, team manager Ansskär Toyota gives Stephen Ansskär some last words of encouragement. The ebullient Toyota has an infectious sense of fun, and his enthusiasm helps ease the tension in moments of crisis. With both the Dower Porsches running into problems and the Courages unable to match their early pace, Fouche's triple stint has taken the Trust Toyota into the lead. The Dower Porsches lost time through unscheduled pit stops and the Sullivan tyre incident, but the Trust car is still running strongly. But everyone knows the night sessions will be all important. While Ansskär prepares for a double shift behind the wheel, the Toyota technicians quickly and efficiently go about their business. Now that the car is in the lead, there's an added urgency in the entire team. The sister car, the Saab Toyota, has also moved up the leaderboard and is lying in 2nd place. Suddenly, there are very real thoughts in the Toyota camp about victory at Le Mans. Nothing is left to chance during pit stops, and after final checks that all is well, Ansskär is sent on his way. While Ansskär leaves the pit to resume battle on the track, back in the garage, a tired Fouche reports back to team manager Ansskär Toyota.
From the beginning, you feel spongy or going worse and worse and worse?
It's just going lower, slightly lower, more spongy.
And if you're pumping, is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
It's not very bad,
Fine.
but you have to pumping.
Yeah, you have to pump a little bit with it.
Pumping is very bad.
It's just going very deep.
Is that very, very deep or just deep?
Between very, very and just deep.
Okay, and when in your 3 states, going worse and worse and worse,
Yeah.
quite a lot.
No, but it's going down.
Just slightly down.
Okay.
There's also frantic activity in the adjoining Saab Toyota garage when the Irvine Martini Krosnoff car makes a scheduled pit stop with the team second behind the sister car.
Well, my first stint, yeah, that was a good dice for the lead between the Porsche and the other Toyota. We were swapping places and really giving it hell. And then they wanted me to run 3 stints in a row. I don't know where we're lying. You know, I've just got in the pits now, so it's good. So we just have to hang in there. We had a bit of a problem with the tyres going off in the rear. For the last 7 laps, I had so much oversteer. It was really getting twitchy and dangerous. It's back in the pits and we've got new tyres on and Stephen's gone out, so let's see if he can hold it together.
As night falls over the Le Mans 24-hour, the race takes on a completely different complexion. While the cars continue to do battle on a battleground now pierced by headlights, thousands of spectators head for the fairground where the entertainment is as fast and furious as the action on the track. Le Mans in the dark is often a nightmare for the drivers, particularly those who can be classified as being more in the amateur category of driver. Lap times drop dramatically, and as the night wears on, pit crews become more and more aware of the possible disaster being just around the corner. The Stuck-Sullivan-Boutsen Porsche was busy fighting its way back up the leaderboard after Sullivan's earlier disaster. The car was running well and pit stops were back on a scheduled basis. The Trust Toyota, still in the lead ahead of the sister car from the Saab team, was still running like clockwork. The drivers went quietly about the task of keeping the car in the lead, and pit stops in the early part of the night session were also on a scheduled basis. Stephen Ansskär completed a double stint at the wheel without any problems, with Bob Wollek keeping the car out in front during a single stint. After his triple stint earlier in the night, George Fouche was catching up on well-earned sleep. Despite the attractions of the fairground, the die-hard faithfuls in the crowd are always determined to see it through until morning. After 9 hours, the Trust Toyota led from the Stuck-Sullivan-Boutsen Porsche, with the second Toyota third. A Nissan 300ZX had also crept onto the top 6. Lap scorers keep a lonely vigil during the night, but there are lighter moments in the garages. Thierry Boutsen, always a cheerful character, was in fine fettle as the night wore on. The WR Peugeot, which caused a stir by setting provisional pole position early on in qualifying, was still running, but a series of problems had dropped the French-built car way down the leaderboard. Getting in and out of the WR was also something of a problem. It was just before dawn when drama struck for the Trust Toyota team. The car had been in the lead for nearly 8 hours when Stephen Ansskär reported a problem to the pits. The atmosphere in the garage turned from quiet confidence to worried frowns. Ansskär reported a vibration in the rear end, and over the radio, team manager Yasuo Toyota desperately tried to get more details of the problem from his driver.
Stephen, how about sound? Sound like differential problem or not?
The Swedish driver brought the car into the pits, and immediately technicians swarmed all over the Toyota. Ansskär reported a severe vibration from the rear of the Toyota, and technicians went to work to try and diagnose the problem. For the first time over the weekend, team manager Yasuo Toyota lost his infectious grin. In an effort to try and cure the vibration, the team decided to replace the rear wing. It was a frustrating time for the pit crew and drivers. They knew that every moment lost in the pits was counting against them. A lead of almost 2 laps gradually built up during the night stints was rapidly evaporating as the other lead cars stayed out on the circuit. The Trust Toyota crew worked as quickly as they could to complete the repairs. The new wing was fitted to the car, but working under extreme pressure is never easy. And all the time, precious seconds were ticking away. Unscheduled pit stops are a team's worst fear at Le Mans, particularly when you're in the lead. For the Toyota Trust squad, it was a nightmare. The car had lost its lead by the time the Toyota was ready once again for battle. Stephen Ansskär still had to complete his shift behind the wheel, and it was a dejected Toyota crew that finally saw the Swedish driver head back into the action. Team manager Yasuo Toyota was still worried and ordered Ansskär back into the pits if the driver felt the car was unsafe to drive.
Please try one more lap, but if you feel dangerous, come in pit. You choose, okay? You say high left, vibration disappear. If you feel you can run in one lap, you can run one lap. If you don't feel that, come in pit, okay?
Out on the circuit, it was still dark, with wary drivers and pit crews just waiting for daylight. Those teams still left in the race were pushing as hard as they could. For Ansskär and his teammates, the job that now lay ahead was to try and pull back valuable lost time. It was not going to be an easy task, but they had no option. Of cold comfort for the Trust Toyota team was the fact that the sister car from the Saab Toyota stable had moved into the lead. The new pit complex at Le Mans is an impressive sight during the night. Faithful fans in the stands above the pits get a bird's eye view of the action in the garages. But for the Trust Toyota team, there were more problems. Stephen Ansskär had reported back to the pits that the vibration at the rear of the car was back and getting worse. Team manager Yasuo Toyota and his technicians decided the problem lay in either the rear suspension or differential and recalled Ansskär into the pits. Here the team was ready for a major rebuild of the back of the Toyota. Once again, it was a crushing blow for the team as the car was wheeled into the garage. The atmosphere in the Trust Toyota pit was now one of frantic activity. Once again, everyone in the team knew that precious seconds were ticking away. Out on the circuit, the other lead cars were still circulating, and the Trust Toyota was losing ground all the time to the sister car and the Dow Porsches, which were still running strongly. While the technicians went to work, a dispirited Ansskär explained the problem to teammate Bob Wollek.
I don't know really. It's a very bad vibration. I believe it could be the crown wheel or pinion or something like that. I really don't know what the problem is. But you know, the vibration was so bad and the sound was so bad from somewhere in the rear. So I don't know really what it is.
The modern high-tech racing sports car is not the easiest piece of machinery to work on when rapid repairs are needed. Mechanics were working as quickly as they could under the circumstances, but there were decisions to be made, and team manager Yasuo Toyota was involved in constant discussions with his technicians. And all the while, the other lead cars were steadily circulating and opening up an ever-increasing lead over the stricken Toyota. Constant references to the TV and timing monitors in the pits kept the team constantly in touch with what was happening out on the circuit. And it was all bad news. As the Trust Toyota crew set about replacing the entire rear end of their charge, Yasuo Toyota could only stand by and watch in frustration. Gone completely was Toyota's earlier bonhomie, but who could blame him? While the crew battled to get the car back into one piece, George Fouche was blissfully unaware of the problems that had befallen the team. Fouche had headed for the team caravan to catch up on his sleep. While the Trust team battled with its problems, it was a case of plain sailing for the Saab sister car. Irvine Martini and Korosnov had put the car solidly into the lead ahead of the Dow Porsches, which had picked up the pace during the night to regain lost ground. The dawn of a new day was a welcome relief for most crews. While a red squirrel frolicked in a somewhat dangerous position, others simply went about their work. In the Trust Toyota garage, work on the Fouche Ansskär Wollek Toyota was almost complete. The car had spent the better part of an hour in the pits and, not surprisingly, had dropped out of the top 3. Pit crew were putting the final touches to the repairs, with Bob Wollek designated the job of taking the first stint when the car got back into action. It was a grim-faced Wollek who sat in the cockpit, all hopes of a first victory at Le Mans having disappeared for the French veteran. Team manager Yasuo Toyota was just as grim-faced. All in all, the Toyota had to spend an hour and 15 minutes in the pits. During that time, it lost 17 laps to the lead Toyota. It was just after 6 a.m. when the Toyota finally rejoined the race. The Saab Toyota was firmly in the lead after 16 hours, hotly pursued by the 2 Dower Porsches, with the Nissan ZX up into 4th place. The Trust Toyota was back in 5th place. FGP committed to securing South Africa's future in Grand Prix racing. Exhausted Trust Toyota technicians littered the team's garage. After working through the night, they collapsed where they could to try and catch up on a few minutes' sleep. A disappointed Fouche was still tired, but up and about.
I'm still tired, I'll be honest. And yeah, obviously we're very disappointed. I've just come in here. I heard the news an hour or so ago, but I haven't really heard of what the problem was. So I'm going to go and have a chat with the boys now and see what the hassle was. And yeah, but of course, very disappointed.
Driving in his last Le Mans, Bob Wollek did a double stint for the Trust team after a lengthy pit stop. Wollek reported no problems, with the team setting its sight on the 4th place Nissan ZX, which had stunned everyone. Wollek reported no problems, and when he came into the pits, handed the car over to George Fouche, who was also scheduled to do a double stint. The only tactics were to keep pushing as hard as possible and hope the cars up ahead ran into problems. For Wollek, the race had turned into a personal disappointment. In 23 previous starts, the highest finish he had managed was a 2nd. Like Derek Bell, who has 5 Le Mans victories to his credit, the Frenchman had decided that this was to be his last Le Mans. He would have loved to go out in a blaze of glory. Bits and pieces of brake pad of the Trust Toyota were cause for concern among the technicians.
I think they changed the brake pads, and the brakes are okay as far as I'm concerned. I could feel it, the car handles okay. But again, we lost it. C'est la vie.
Out on the circuit, George Fouche, in the middle of a double stint at the wheel, was pushing as hard as he could. With the Toyota running like clockwork once more, the immediate target was the Nissan in 4th place. It was unrealistic to expect to make up 16 laps on the front runners, but Fouche is a fighter and wasn't about to throw in the towel. Daylight and warm sunny weather had brought the crowds back to Le Mans. There was still plenty of drama to come. That's the nature of the most famous motor race in the world. Fouche was once again into his stride and going like a train. At times, the South African looked to be trying a little too hard. Easy does it, George. The Saab Toyota was still in the lead, but was also in for a few anxious moments. Eddie Irvine was at the wheel when the Toyota came up on the slower number 65 Venturi in the S's after the pits. Irvine is not one to stand on ceremony and firmly punted the Venturi off the circuit. "Look in your mirrors, son," was the message Irvine rammed home. A chastened Venturi driver managed to avoid contact with the wall. There was more late drama when the Stuck, Sullivan, Boots and Dower Porsche ran into more problems. The car had gradually closed the gap on the lead Saab Toyota and the 2nd Dower Porsche during the night. Then, with Thierry Boutsen driving, a mistake by the Belgian saw a side shaft break. Coming into the Mulzahn corner, Boutsen ran onto the curbing and the damage was done. Now it was Boutsen's turn to limp back to the pits. With only 90 minutes of the race left, the 2nd Dower Porsche was now the only car with a realistic chance of catching the Saab Toyota. George Fouche had closed up on the Nissan, but the Toyota was still a lap down on the car that won the Daytona 24-hour. Now there were two battles to watch, that between the Toyota and the Nissan for 4th place, and the first place scrap between the Saab Toyota and the leading Dow Porsche. The scrap between Toyota and Nissan took a dramatic turn when the Nissan suddenly pulled into the pits, much to the relief of the Trust Toyota team watching proceedings on the TV and timing monitors. The Nissan was still in the pits when Fouche went steaming down the pit lane to eventually move up into 4th place. With just over an hour to go, the Eddie Irvine, Mauro Martini, Jeff Krosnoff car looked to be cruising to victory. Apart from a brake problem which had plagued the team throughout the race, the Saab Toyota drivers had reported no major problems. Toyota's dream of winning Le Mans looked to be coming true when, as so often happens, the race produced a sting in the tail. Driving along the pit straight, the Toyota suddenly slowed and pulled to the side of the circuit. The car coasted to a halt at the pit exit, and there was consternation and bewilderment in the Saab Toyota camp. The door of the Toyota flew open, with Krosnoff frantically trying to undo the seat harness and communicate with the pits at the same time. No one knew what happened to the Toyota. The only certain thing was that it meant trouble and opened the door to the Dower cars. Krosnoff, an American, finally got out of the car, ran around the back of the Toyota and began fiddling around under the rear bodywork. Marshals were getting ready to push the Toyota off the circuit when Krosnoff jumped back into the car and was eager to be on his way again. The marshals insisted that the American once again fasten his seatbelts before being allowed to rejoin the race. It was another frustrating delay for the Toyota team as the marshals insisted that Krosnoff buckle up. The unfortunate Krosnoff finally got underway, but elsewhere on the circuit was the menacing sight of the Dalmas-Haywood-Baldy Porsche, which was rapidly closing in on the Toyota. The gear linkage had broken on the Toyota, but Krosnoff jammed the car in 3rd gear and was slowly on his way back to the pits. Tension was mounting as the Dalmas-Haywood-Baldy car came into the pits for its final stop. The Dower Porsche was still 3 laps behind the Toyota as it came in for the last time for a routine driver change and refueling. Meanwhile, out on the circuit, Krosnoff was still limping back towards the Toyota pit. The leading Dower Porsche left the pits just as the Toyota arrived. The car was immediately surrounded by Toyota technicians, cameramen and photographers, with an animated Krosnoff yelling for action. There was a beehive of activity around the Toyota as mechanics hurriedly tried to get the car back into action. Out on the circuit, the Dower Porsche was closing the gap. High drama, as with the Saab Toyota still in the pits, the Dalmas-Haywood-Baldy car swept into the lead. The Toyota lost 13 minutes in the pits, and when Eddie Irvine rejoined the race, the Toyota was suddenly down in 3rd place. The two Dower Porsches had taken the opportunity to move into the lead. Porsche looked set once again to win Le Mans, but the drama wasn't over yet. There was heartache for the Bugatti team on the Marque's first appearance at Le Mans in 50 years. After holding down a place in the top 10, the Bugatti race ended in dramatic fashion when the car hit the crash barriers on the Mulsanne. It was put down to tyre failure. A huge disappointment for the Bugatti team, but Le Mans 94 wasn't yet finished where drama is concerned. A fired-up Eddie Irvine mounted a last-ditch assault on the second-place Dower car, driven in the closing stages by Thierry Boutsen. With the tyres on the Porsche shot to ribbons, Irvine took 3 seconds a lap off the Porsche in the closing stages. The Irishman snatched second place in the penultimate lap when Boutsen was balked by two slower cars approaching the Ford curves, only a couple of 100 metres from the finish line. Happiness is as the Saab Toyota moved into second place. Right at the end, Eddie Irvine had ensured honour in defeat for the unfortunate Saab Toyota team. It was all academic, as out in front a lap ahead, the Yannick Dalmas, Hurley Haywood, Mauro Baldi, Dow Porsche cruised around to victory. For Porsche, it was their 13th success at Le Mans and the first since 1987. The traditional flag-waving marshals greeted the winning Porsche as it crossed the line. But further back, the race between Irvine and Boutsen was not yet over. The Toyota and Porsche, weaving their way through slower traffic, were continuing their fight right to the bitter end. Finally, it was the Toyota that crossed the line first in one of the more dramatic Le Mans finishes in recent years. For the Trust Toyota team, there was also honour in defeat. A memorable Le Mans ended up with Porsche and Toyota sharing the first 4 places. A tremendous performance saw the Nissan 300ZX into 5th place, with Derek Bell 6th in his farewell appearance at Le Mans.
Well, it's disappointing, you know. It's something I've always dreamed of, and I've been here many times, and you know, while we were leading it was fantastic, but I suppose you have to accept that it's motor racing, and these kind of things in long distance racing is going to happen. I mean, we imagine just a tooth on the differential that came off, and that caused the problem. So we were in the pits for an hour and fell back to 6th, came back to 4th. So yeah, we finished. I'm happy for the team. You know, they've been working extremely hard. So I'm happy that we finished, but I'm disappointed we finished in that position. I would like to have won it.
FGP was proud to be associated with George Fouche's 11th assault on the Le Mans 24 Hour.